Good afternoon, everyone. I forgot to ask, but let's start off with a chant. And if you in San Diego, we do a lot of participation. So if you know this chant, chant along. Om Masato Ma Sadgamaya Tamaso Ma Jyotir Gamaya Mrityor Ma Amritam Gamaya Havir Havir Maedhi Rudrayate Dakshinam Mukham Tenamam Pahi Nityam Tenamam Pahi Nityam Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Lead us from the unreal to the real. Lead us from darkness to light. Lead us from death to immortality. O Lord, shine through and through and ever protect us with thy loving presence. Om, peace, peace, peace. Well, I want to thank you guys for inviting me. I'm from San Diego, as was introduced. And just let me start off by saying, do you guys know what San Diego means? Saint Diego. What's a saint? So there was another term San Diego was used to mean. It was coined, I think, by Swami Harinamananda. He had passed away in San Diego. And someone told me from his group, he said, San Diego. San die ego. It's where the ego dies and you become a saint. So that's part of the process of what we're going to be talking about today. We are going to be talking about the inner pilgrimage. And specifically, we're going to be talking about how your outer journey, your outer pilgrimage, relates to your inner pilgrimage. And what I'd like to do today is talk to you about my pilgrimage in Kailas. But I don't want to talk about the physical pilgrimage. I want to talk about, in the journey of my physical pilgrimage, how it relates to our inner pilgrimage, the inner journey within. What happens? So we're going to go, what I'd like to do is talk about my experiences of Kailas and how it relates to your experience of walking life right now. As I speak, we're going to see what rises in you. What's the Divine Mother saying to you about your journey in coming here to this center? What she's saying about your journey in life. You want to start to hear her voice as I'm speaking. What's she telling you to do? So, quickly, how many people have gone to Kailas by show of hands? Nobody. Okay. What I'm going to do is, one person. Okay. Oh, I see. Up there. Okay, great. What I want to do is just time is very limited here. So within a couple minutes, I'm going to take you on a quick, what a pilgrimage to Kailas means. Where do we point here? Oh, down, right. Okay. So when you go to Kailash, you actually land in Kathmandu, and that's in Nepal. And normally you get the blessings of Lord Shiva in the Pashupatinath temple. There's a 5-faced Shiva, and you ask for his blessings. It's very auspicious to begin. As you go, I went to Nagarkot, and you try to get acclimatized to the high altitude. You'll start to see here the Himalayan peaks. And I went with the Swami, another Swami, and it's very important who you go with, because depending on who you go with will determine whether it's a spiritual journey or whether it's a sightseeing trip. So your inner guide, that Swami or that person you go with, they will be sort of your GPS, your God-pointing system. So remember, it's very important who you go with when you go. Oops, sorry. We went to Nyalem. And here you'll see these are the typical buses that we go on as we go on our expedition here. And what happens, you'll notice, is the roads are very narrow. And the ride is very bumpy. And when two buses have to go past each other, it gets very, very scary. One Swami one devotee had told Swami, when you talk about God, I don't really think about God. I feel kind of sleepy. But when you drive, all I can do is think about God. You find you're really doing your japa on this trip here. What happens is you'll find unexpected things happening. There was a landslide. We actually had to get off the bus, carry our luggage, and try to get onto another bus on the other side. Luckily, some of us were able to get there, and some of us did not, and they had to sleep that night at that place. From Inyalam, we take these 4x4s. Now we're on the Chinese side. Kailas is actually in China. And as you can see, we go through beautiful waterfalls. You go through, at 12,500 feet here, you find it's very quiet. Here's some of the Tibetans. Here are some sand dunes. Now, it's unusual to find sand dunes at this altitude, and it's said that when the Eurasian land masses collided, some of the bottom bed of the ocean was raised up. We slept here. You can see the conditions. We sleep fully clothed because it's very cold. Here's some of the children here. From Paryang, we went to a place called Lake Manasarovar, which is the highest freshwater lake in the world at about 15,000 feet. It's one of the most beautiful sights you'll see because it's really untouched. The water of the lake changes from turquoise to blue. It's traditional to bathe in the lake to purify yourself before you go and have the darshan of Mount Kailas, which is seen as the embodiment of Shiva. Here you see a first glimpse of Mount Kailas. And at this time, we're at the bank of Manasarovar. It's also traditional to do a homo fire. And in a homo fire, what you'll find is we're offering different type of leaves, bilva leaves. We invoke the presence of God in the fire. Here is Shiva. And we're offering our attachments, our identifications into the fire as a way of purifying ourselves and letting go. Here's Mount Kailas. It's at an altitude of 22,000 feet at the peak. Now, it's traditional to do what's called a parikrama, a circumambulation around Mount Kailas. We circumambulate on our right side. It's a way to show respect, honor, and surrender. The first thing that we do is we go to Yama's temple. Yama is the Lord of Death. And so we pray for for Yama's blessings and also not to take us away on this journey with him. And here we actually go starting our parikrama around Mount Kailas. Now you'll see we start in groups, but it's at an altitude here between 16 to 18,000 feet. So what happens is you start groups and then you start finding your own pace. And as you can see here, you start going by yourself and it's just you and Mount Kailas. And there's a sense and depth of peace that you find that you may not find in any other place. So this is just to give you a taste of what Mount Kailas is like. So how does this relate to our divine awareness, our inner unfoldment? Quickly, because we don't have a lot of time, in the Taittiriya Upanishads, it says that each of us it can be divided into sort of 5 quadrants, into 5 selves. It says that they call them koshas. And I'm just going to make this very simple right now. There's our physical self, there's our emotional self, there's our mental self, there's our ego self, and there's our bliss self. And behind all of this, the core of who we really are, is that infinite consciousness we call the Atman. And when that light, when the consciousness of the Atman illumines our blissful self, we feel the bliss and joy. When it illumines our ego, we become aware that we're individuals and sentient living beings. When it illumines our mind, we become aware of our attitudes, our ideas. When it illumines our emotional self, we become aware of our feelings. And when it illumines our physical self, we become aware of this body, the senses of this body. And when it goes, the Atman shines through the five senses, the way we interact with this world, we become aware of the world. So, behind this face, behind this body, there is a hidden inner landscape which nobody else knows about. Each of us has an inner landscape with different thought currents, different emotional whirlpools, creating different pathways into our body and into our mind. So our job today, if you're willing, is to discover this inner terrain. We're going to go on a pilgrimage so that we can start to become aware of the different dimensions of ourselves. We're going to start a self-discovery. How does this physical journey, any pilgrimage, any traveling, how does that make us conscious of the inner unfoldment that's going on within? That's our goal today. Okay, so what disciplines do we need to be fit for to prepare for this journey? How do we transform ourselves so that we're fit for this pilgrimage? Well, in the Bible, it says, new wine, fresh skin. New wine, fresh skin. Once Jesus said, no one puts new wine into old skin. Otherwise, the skin will burst. You put new wine into fresh skin. What's he saying here? Is that this divine, our Atman consciousness, is constantly shining through us. It's constantly bubbling up through us. But because of our old, tight, wrinkly skin, and I'm not talking about our physical skin, I'm talking about our old attitudes, our old judgments, our old ideas, our old habits, we fail to become aware of this inner light. We fail to recognize how it's manifesting through every one of our experiences. It's like there's this sun. The sun of the Atman is shining. But because our minds are cloudy, because our emotions are cloudy, we fail to perceive it. So, today, what we have to do is we have to create a new skin, a new relationship with our body, a new mindset, new attitudes, so that we can start to experience this Atman consciousness, this evanescent divinity that's constantly shining through. So, the main premise we're going to be looking at today is the premise that's used in worship. The premise is Devam Bhutva, Devam Yajat. To experience the divine, we are going to become divine. So, what can some of the new disciplines to create this new skin be? What can we do to create this new skin, this new divine skin? Well, the first thing you'll notice when you go on any expedition is how fit your body is. The Upanishads say, Nayam Atma Balahi Nena Labhya. The Atman cannot be realized by the weak. So therefore, one of the first things we have to do is we have to make this body strong. And when I went on my journey to Kailas, you know, one of the first things I noticed when I was walking? I noticed my feet. I noticed as I started walking how they started to swell. The blisters, the corns that started forming. And I noticed as when I went downhill, my toes would push into my shoe cap, and how painful it would be. And I realized one thing, that without my feet, this journey is not going to be possible. So you start paying attention to your feet. You start massaging them, bandaging them, trying to keep them dry. It's probably the one area that we neglect the most. But what you discover is walking plunges our awareness into our body and into our environment. We really become aware of our physical body and the environment. And we see what we're walking in front of and what we feel. It forces us really to be in the present moment. And also, one thing you notice, at 16,000 feet, you only have half the amount of air what you're breathing right here. So, if you walk too fast or talk too much, what happens? What happens? You run out of breath. So, you really learn to quickly pace yourself. And the second thing you learn, you know what you learn? You learn to shut up. And it was hard because we had about 30 people in our group. And sometimes, for the first time, this was the first time that they really had to shut up. Humble comes from the word humus, which means close to the earth. You become attentive and grounded to your body and your earth. So, one question we can ask is, can walking be part of achieving our everyday skin? Is it possible to make walking as a part of our spiritual practice? You know, when I went to the seminary in India, there's a place, Bellarmine, the headquarters, and that first morning, one of the things I noticed was that there were monks. Not everybody was in the meditation hall. There were some monks that were walking around the temple. And I find walking to be something that if your mind is turbulent, or if it's got a lot of energy, instead of just sitting down and meditating, maybe we can just walk and chant our mantra. It's a way to offset some of that, diffuse some of that energy as a way to calm our mind. So, the next question we should take as we're preparing for this trip, as we're going on this trip, is what do you take? What do you take? And you know, as Americans, we want to cover for every eventuality. Everything out there should be covered by everything in here in my backpack. So, as I started to walk, the one thing I noticed was I started to feel overloaded. You know why? Why was I overloaded? What? Too many things. And what was the reason there were too many things? What was the first thing I put into my backpack? Food, water. Those are good ones, but actually the very first thing I put into my backpack was fear. Fear. You know, when I started this trip, I started telling my friends and my family, and they started telling me about, oh, especially if you have mothers, do you have this? What about that? What about if this happens? What about if that happens? And then when you start to listen to society, you know, we see how much fear. What about terrorists? What about nuclear threats? And the more fear we have, the more things that was ending into my backpack. And the more overloaded I felt. So what you start to notice is that you really don't need half the things that you've packed. We had one guy, a European person, he had a hairdryer, hair gel, face cream. We were not going to take a shower or a bath for 8 to 9 days. Did it really matter what we looked like? So what happens is you begin to unload. You begin to leave things at various guest houses. So we have to ask on this physical and spiritual pilgrimage on life. What are we carrying today? And do we need it? And as I began to lighten my backpack, there are three things I noticed. One thing was that I really didn't need all the things that I thought I could do without. I didn't have to be such a wimp. The second thing I noticed was that if I didn't have it, that's when my creativity started to come in. And I can learn to adapt to things that I didn't have. And the third thing that happened was, if I really needed something and I didn't have it, well, you know what happened? That's when the magic, the grace of the divine came through. And sometimes I wonder, is that part of the reason why we don't have grace, we don't have magic in our lives, is because we factored the divine out of our lives. When we do everything ourselves and say, I can do without you, the magic is gone. But when we're prepared to take a risk, prepared to trust the divine, to open our lives to the divine, then we find that that grace may start to flow in. How often during the day do we dialogue with the divine? How often are we prepared to accept what the divine is giving us? You know, in Kailas, I can't tell you the number of times that we came into unexpected situations, from avalanches to going to places where we had no accommodations. There were just things that kept coming up that we weren't prepared for. And that's when we found something happened. What constantly happened was our expectations kept getting hammered, and hammered. Pretty soon we had no expectations. And in that point, we were just grateful for what we were given. There's a saying, man proposes, God disposes, and then reproposes something else. And you always know it's the divine because her timing is perfect. So the question, what are you being invited this Sunday in your journey here to physically let go of? Could this be part of creating our new skin, is to clear out what we've been carrying? You know, my dad, physically, I remember in his wallet is like the size of a hamburger. Okay? So many cards and so many things he's carrying. You know, when he sits, sometimes he actually feels like he's tilting over on one side. What about our iPhones? How many apps do we have on there? Are there things we can start clearing out? I mean, do we really need to have it beep when Donald Trump is eating breakfast? I mean, do we need to know all the things that are happening in the world? It seems like sometimes we've gone from a generation of tilted hips to crooked necks. So, we have to ask ourselves, what is our spring cleaning today? What do we have to get rid of? As we continue walking, we now become accustomed to the physical body. You become accustomed to the environment. And as our bodies begin to adapt, I no longer feel the pain in my feet. And I'm fine, and I can now maintain my breath. So our attention now begins to focus into our emotional and mental selves, our mind and emotions. As you walk, what happens? Well, there's something rhythmic, something healing. What the walking does is it starts to loosen the memories, what we call the samskaras, that are caught in our body and mind. When you're walking in silence for hours, memories just start to come up. Unsolicited, one by one, like wave after wave. And you need a little water. Sometimes tears begin to swell up. What are they? I start speaking to Kailas about my past, regrets, hurts that were done to me, things that I've done to others, mistakes, griefs that I haven't had a chance to process yet, sadness. You can't escape them. They just come up, wave after wave. They're sort of like uninvited guests that come knocking at your door. But instead of turning off your lights and hiding under your bed, which I used to do when the Jehovah's Witnesses used to knock at our doors, you can't hide behind anything because there's nothing to hide behind. You have to just witness them. And maybe these guests are coming up to say goodbye. Are you willing to say goodbye? We had a devotee in our center. Her name was Clemmy. She lived to 102. She had been a Vedantist for 80 years and had been practicing spirituality for that time. Very devoted, very sincere. At the end of her life, a few months before she passed away, she called me and she said, Swami, I'm having all these memories starting to come up now, and they're not very nice memories. They're sort of bad things that are coming up in my mind. What's happened? I've been practicing spirituality for 80 years. What is the result of all that if all these negative things are coming up right now? I remember I called this very senior Swami and told him the situation. And what that Swami told me was that this is natural. When the conscious part of our mind starts to weaken, the unconscious starts to come through. And all those things that we've repressed, put into the basement of our mind, starts to come up. But the important thing, sort of like coming up like a magician, pulling different color scarves, red, yellow, blue. But the important thing he said is, don't pay attention to them. Just witness them. Allow them to come up and bubble out. Come up and bubble out. Do not react. How much fear are we carrying? And what have we been invited to let go of in terms of what we're carrying physically, mentally, emotionally? Could this be what the pilgrimage is inviting us to do today? What are we being invited today to let go of right now? So, today what we're going to do is try and exercise. I'm from Hollywood. I'm from our Southern California Center. And in California, sometimes we do what's called New Agey type things. So excuse this, but we're going to try something new today. We're going to do an exercise of learning to let go of things. What we're going to do today is identify our physical, mental, and emotional problems or distractions and offer them to the divine as a way of releasing them. So, in this fire here, we're going to call it our yajna fire. Usually they invoke the presence of God. We are going to offer our attachments as a way of destroying them. So what I'd like you to do right now is just to sit quietly for a moment. Tune into your body and ask, what does your body want to let go of right now? What is it that physically prevents you from staying in the present moment? Are we being invited to let go of youth and accept wrinkles and gray hair? Of letting go of trying to stay young forever? Letting go of the energy that we once had when we were 20, but now that we're 70. Maybe it's letting go of our body image or a certain physical feature that we don't like. Maybe it's something that you're experiencing right now, a pain in your body, a backache, a muscle soreness. Again, what do you physically want to let go of right now? Once you have it in mind, I'd like you to offer this to the divine. What we're going to do is we're going to chant this mantra up here, the first mantra. Om Ain Kalaya Swaha. This mantra, Om, represents the infinite. Ain is a bija mantra, which represents here the destruction of ignorance. Kalaya is time, because time disintegrates anything physical. Swaha is an offering. We're going to do this 3 times. So I'd like you to chant it along with me. And in this paper here, impress what you want to physically let go of. And let's do this 3 times together. Okay? Impress what you want to physically let go. And I'm going to offer it into the fire. Om Ain Kalaya Swaha. Om Ain Kalaya Swaha. Om Ain Kalaya Swaha. O Divine Mother, manifesting as time, please accept our offering and help us let go. Now, mentally, what are we being invited to let go of mentally? Attitudes that we've held on to from our folks, or maybe opinions that we're not prepared to change. Maybe we have judgments or prejudices. Can we let go and be prepared to find a new way of looking at life? Could this be what the Divine Mother is asking us to do? What are the thoughts right now, if you were to think about it, that don't serve you? It could be thoughts that trigger negative thinking, that brings up the critical, the judgmental voice within us. They're the thoughts that create distractions in our lives. When they're triggered, we go off into another whirlpool and become upset. When we hear them, like politics, family, race, we unconsciously react, like feeling disrespected. So mentally identify that thought now. The thought of lecturing creates anxiety within me. That's what I want to let go of. Identify that thought, and we're going to offer it in the second mantra. Here, the same thing. This time it's going to be to, it's going to be, yes, Ishvara. It means God, yes. Do we have a match? So here Ishvara is that cosmic intelligence, the divine. And we're going to repeat this mantra 3 times. So now, mentally identify that thought that creates distractions in your life. Let's do this 3 times. Om Ain Ishvaraya Swaha. Om Ain Ishvaraya Swaha. Om Ain Ishvaraya Swaha. O Divine Mother, manifesting as Ishvara, may you accept our thoughts and help us be free. Now, emotionally, what do we have to let go of? You know, emotionally, emotions are probably our heaviest baggage that we're carrying. Maybe there's certain relationships that are not helpful for us now. Maybe they're unrealistic dreams that don't work now. And as long as we hold on to them, the real dream is not going to be there for you. Maybe it's letting go of old loves. They've moved on. And by letting go of them, we're prepared for the new loves in our life. Maybe it's letting go of old hurt. That we carry these old hurts. And when we scratch it, it gives us pain. Can we forgive? Maybe it's mistakes or embarrassing moments. We all have them. Or failures. Sometimes it's even our cultural baggage that we brought along with us. When Swami Vivekananda came to the United States, he taught Vedanta in its purest form, devoid of its caste culture, of its cow culture, of its kitchen culture, in its purest form. What are we feeling right now? What is the feeling that comes up and it's not serving you, that you want to surrender? And when you feel it, it may arouse shame, guilt, or anxiousness, maybe even anger. We all have it. Just calmly think what it is. It can be the way someone treated us. Let us now offer that to our Ishtadevata, the aspect of God that we connect with emotionally. And in this case, I'm just going to use Sri Ramakrishna. So, have that thought, the emotional thought that you want to clear yourself of. And 3 times, let's repeat the third mantra. Om Aim Shri Ramakrishnaya Swaha. Om Aim Shri Ramakrishnaya Swaha. Om Aim Shri Ramakrishnaya Swaha. O Divine Mother, manifesting as Sri Ramakrishna, may you accept our emotions and help us be free. One way of doing this, and if you keep doing this as a practice, is what happens is you create more and more space between you and that problem, between you and that thought, between you and that feeling. So when someone maybe cuts you off on the freeway, you don't overreact. You don't go on unconscious mode. You begin to lighten the charge of that impact, of that thought, of that emotion, of that feeling, so that it doesn't overwhelm you. Now imagine, if you're to do that, how much lighter your load would be. It's a process here we're going through of trying to cleanse, release, let go, and stay in the present moment. And when I was walking, I remember that I was seeing the person way ahead of us, a person that was sort of bragging in our group, and I started noticing that he's going to reach the place before any one of us, and the envious eye within me started coming out. Oh, he's going to reach the shelter before us. He's going to get the best bed. He's going to brag to others about him being the first to get there. Or when I looked behind me, I noticed the judgmental eye started coming. God, why are those guys so out of shape? Why can't they keep up? So we have to ask ourselves, with what eyes are we looking at the world through? The eyes of inferiority? The eyes of superiority? With what eyes are we seeing the world through? What needs to be left behind today? What are we going to leave at our guest house beds once and for all? Francis Dorff wrote a poem called Lightening the Load. What he said was, the first thing we have to do is to notice that we've loaded down this camel with so much baggage, we'll never get through the desert alive. Something has to go. Then we can begin to dump the 1,000 things that we've brought along until even the camel has to go. And we're walking barefoot on the desert sand. Now, there's no telling what will happen then, but I've heard someone walking this way has seen a burning bush. That burning bush is our Atman consciousness, our divine light. So, once you evacuated a lot of the pain, what do you think the next thing that comes up? The heels of joy. You begin to talk to Kailas about your hopes, your dreams, your aspirations. And suddenly, you see Kailas and you feel Kailas is asking you, are you walking your life? Whose life have you been walking? And maybe suddenly you wake up and ask, am I living my life because of my partner? Am I living my life because it's what I thought my parents or society wanted me to do? Am I living my life just because it's what my education tells me to do? It's what my church tells me to do? Am I walking my own life? Have I discovered my own truth, my own path? And you know what? If we haven't discovered our truth, will we ever be alive? Have we lost the connection with what makes us alive? That makes us energized. That makes us free. I mean, if I were to ask you in the morning when you wake up, do you feel energized? Do you feel that you're flowing and opening up? Or do you feel depressed and life is stagnating? How many of us are not living our lives because we have not been able to claim our own truth, our own path? Where are we in our life journey? Are we traveling the road to glitter, or are we traveling the road to peace? So as we keep walking, what we notice is that as the body calms down and adjusts to the environment, our awareness expands into our emotions and into our mind. And as we silence one part of our personality, the awareness goes into another part of our existence. And once the memories and the emotions begin to diminish, our awareness now begins to expand into our ego, our identity. And one of the gifts, this is truly a gift, that traveling gives us, is to be anonymous. To let go of our identity. Nobody knows me. I can be free to be myself and leave all my duties behind. I am free. I can experience the freedom of anonymity. We can finally start taking off the mask of these egos. You know, all of us here have certain roles to play. When was the last time that you could just let go of all these roles and just be free? No boss role, no parent role, no Swami role. Just unbuckle and be you. Sometimes we have to ask, how can we breathe with all these masks that we're wearing? To let go of all these masks and get back to our primal, essential self. To be okay with not having all the answers. To be okay with not having to live up to others' expectations. Take off the hats of the ego. Let go of the identity. Let go of all the things, that support you. The doctor role, the CEO role, the engineering role, the Swami role, the president role, the CEO role, the things that give you respect and importance. These are sometimes things that we hide behind. These also have to be left behind. We can be a doctor at the office, but it's important to bring the doctor role into the temple. Can we let go of the roles when it's not necessary? When we step out of our working environment? Do we feel the need, or do we feel the need to bring them into the other aspects of our life because of the respect and entitlement it gives us? So, our time is getting quick, so I'm going to go. We have to stop hiding behind all these roles. Sometimes it's the beauty. Sometimes it's the skill. Sometimes it's our strength. What do you find when you going down Mount Kailas, you find as you're walking, you're stripped away of all these things, of all your supports. No family support, no internet support, not even your physical support. It comes out when you just let go. And in that point of surrendering, in that point where you have nothing else to gain, all your projections, everything I projected of who I am, what I am, gets disintegrated. That's when you find the magic of his or her grace comes in. When was the last time our feet actually touched the soil and dug into our own dirt? Do you remember what Holy Mother said? Don't find faults in others. Find your own faults. Could this be what the physical and spiritual Camino, this pilgrimage, is asking us to do? To take off our mask? Can we let go of the self-image that colors us, our shame, our guilt, our anger, our worries? We've created this self-image based on what others want to see. So think right now, the last step. Think of the self-image that you have right now about yourself. And let us repeat the final mantra, Brahmane, and let's offer it to the divine in the form of Brahman. So think of your own self-image, whatever that self-image is, and let's offer it by chanting this mantra. Om Aim Brahmane Swaha. Om Aim Brahmane Swaha. Om Aim Brahmane Swaha. May we offer our identity into that infinite consciousness. As you continue to walk, as we continue to walk, once the tears of sadness have passed away, the tears of joy have come, the simplicity of life gets reduced to a backpack, a road, and a walking stick, and the divine. And the divine becomes the road. And the road maybe even starts to speak to you. In the Chandogya Upanishads, a young boy, Satyakama, was on a journey. And the divine spoke to him through a cow, a fire, a swan, a bird, each time revealing a different aspect of his divine self. You know, one Swami explained to me that once your individual will gets infused into the divine will, that divine will begins to instruct you, to guide for you, to show you, sort of like a GPS system. A God-pointing system starts to awaken from within. When a rational intellect becomes silent and surrenders, the divine will takes over and it instructs us through sometimes different symbols. And as I just walked, I discovered that walking not only loosened the memories, but also the rhythmic walking begins to open up, what? An inner divine gravity within us. We all have this divine gravity. We discover that she's pulling us to her. But because we have so many distractions in our life, to Google this, to watch this, Donald Trump is on this, we don't get a chance to experience silence for 8 hours at a time in walking. The divine gravity is going to start pulling us into her, our divine consciousness. Once we can get through these distractions, once we can get through this boredom. And the minute we feel this pull, this longing, this desire, the urge for deep, still quietness, know that is her trying to cozy up to you. That is her trying to get close to you. I remember one of our Swami Sarvadevananda, the head of the Hollywood Center, would tell us, the moment you feel an inclination for quietness, just go and run to the shrine. Drop everything. That's her calling you. So that walking was pulling us also into a place inside us that we knew of a place we've been to, but never to that extent. A new place, yet an old place. A familiar place, yet a completely strange place. And there's a divine gravity in each of us pulling us to that sacred place. So I'm going to wind down here with a poem by Wendell Berry. He says, "The world cannot be discovered by a journey of miles, no matter how long or how far, but only by a spiritual journey, a journey of 1 inch. Very arduous, humbling, and joyful, by which we arrive at the ground of our own feet and learn to be at home. The world cannot be discovered by a journey of miles. It's not going to be covered by the distance we travel, no matter where we're going, but only a spiritual journey of 1 inch. Very arduous, humbling, and joyful. What is that 1 inch? What is that 1 inch? When I thought about this, I had an answer, and then I asked Swami, and he also said the same thing. The journey of 1 inch, the spiritual journey, is the journey from going from your physical body, your physical heart, to your spiritual heart. That is the journey of 1 inch. And through that process, very arduous, very humbling, the process of dissolving all these things that we project ourselves to be, to get to that divine opening, the divine heart to awaken, of humility. That is the spiritual journey. To be, when we're there, we find we're at the ground of our own being. We're finally resting in our home. So, the definition of a pilgrim, I'll end off with this, comes from 2 Latin words. They are, I don't have the pen, I'll just have to say it. Per ager. Per ager. Ager means field. Per is beyond. The pilgrim is someone who has the courage to go beyond their own field. To per ager, to step out of their field, to go from their known to the unknown, from their safety and security into the mystery. A pilgrim is someone who can let go and shed their old skin. And today, we all have been invited to become pilgrims, to per ager, to make this inner pilgrimage within us, the inner journey to the unknown different aspects of ourselves. So, what I'd like to tell you is that every journey can be a pilgrimage, even a walk to the supermarket. As you're walking, see how your awareness flows from your body to your emotions, to your mind. See if you can find a point of stillness. I invite everybody to do this. Thank you so much.